Welcome and thank you very much for joining us. So last Saturday was Leonard Peikoff's, perhaps I don't want to say last public lecture, but it has been advertised and in a way he has presented this as his last lecture. So for those of us who watched it, and I assume for those who were there, it was a very special moment. I know people who told me that, and I'm one of them, that if it weren't for the flying ban, we would take an airplane and go just to see, just for once, Leonard Peikoff deliver a lecture live. So he's the person who has helped us, many of us, understand objectivism. In my view, one of the best public speakers I've ever seen. So it would be so great to be there. But we have today someone with us who not only was there, but actually had an active role in organizing this event and making this event happen. So we have with us Lisa VanDamme from the VanDamme Academy, but also Lisa, you have this program where you read books, the Read With Me thing, through which I finally read some Dostoevsky. So I encourage you to go check out Lisa's work. Probably many of you already know her. And also today we have Mark Pellegrino with us. Hi, Mark.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks a lot. So let's start very quickly. So I don't like this style where I keep asking questions, but I have so many questions where today's episode is also going to be me asking Lisa questions about how was it? It's like, we've missed this very cool party, and then next day you want to learn all the details. So Lisa, let's start with this. So what was your role in this? What's your relationship with Dr. Peikoff, and how did this event become a reality? We all thought that Leonard Peikoff had retired from public speaking. I think his last lecture was something on the dim hypothesis years ago. So how did we have this very pleasant surprise?
He gives me a lot more credit for bringing this to be than I actually deserve. And I've been reflecting on why he seems inclined to give me credit for making it happen. And I think I know the answer. So a few years ago, I gave a talk on the poetry of John Keats. And before I gave it at OCON, I gave a private practice run of the lecture, which he expressed an interest in attending. But when he asked to attend it, it was going to be a room of about maybe 30 people. And he said, I want to come, but I want you to seat me in the back. I want to not be observable to other people. I don't want the attention to be on me. I just want to come in and sit in the back and then leave when it's over. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to ask questions. And I said, of course, you name the terms. I'll make sure you're able to be there under the conditions that will make you comfortable. So we got all that arranged, had him come in at the last minute into the back. I gave the lecture. And at the conclusion of the lecture, I said, does anybody have any questions or comments? And from the back row, Leonard Peikoff's hands go straight into the air. So all of these conditions abruptly went out the window. And naturally, I called on him if he wanted to ask a question or say something. And he went into a very emotional speech about the impact that this lecture had on him, that he didn't think he could feel so deeply about a topic so new to him at this stage in his life. He's always talking about this stage in his life. And so I think that experience may be what ignited the idea that he could do the same for this new passion of operetta, that he was able to go in cold, know nothing about Keats, sit through this lecture, feel very passionate about it. And there's a similar task that we both had of introducing somebody to an art form that we feel very deeply about and feel like people are missing out on. So I have a feeling that that's why he gives me as much credit as he does. My role since that initial inspiration has been to talk to him over, the last year or so that he's been producing it, give him the encouragement that people are actually interested and are going to listen, give him feedback a little bit on the content. I did get to see drafts, and I was going to have the role of hostess. I was planning to find the the facility and invite the guests and do all the organization. And then at one point I put a post up on Facebook saying I needed a venue and asking if anybody had any to recommend. And Tal Sfani from the Ayn Rand Institute reached out to me and said, well, we could host it and we could take care of the live streaming of the event. And I said, okay, if you'd like to do that, I'd be very happy to turn that over to you. That's not my area of expertise. So from the time that they took over the venue and basically took over all production of it, I had very little responsibility for that part of it. So I think of myself as having ignited it, the idea for it a little bit, and then cheerleader along the way. That was my role.
And for me, the most interesting thing was that here you have someone who you would expect that his last dance would be something on objectivism. And this, and as you said something very interesting in your introduction. You said that Leonard Peikoff told you something like, I think I missed my calling. Mm-hmm. And when you say this about the greatest teacher in objectivism, this is something very big. So tell us a bit then something about this passion about specifically operetta. Is this something new? So you explain why he got this idea that I can be passionate about something new and I want to talk about something and that can ignite this passion. But why specifically operetta? So when does Dr. Peikoff come into contact with operetta, and why particularly operetta and not, let's say, The Great Place, which he's already done a course on?
So his first contact with operetta was with Ayn Rand. They would, I assume, listen to operettas together, which he thinks is an inferior means of connecting with operetta. He thinks they really have to be seen to be experienced. But he and Ayn Rand would listen to operetta, and he did form an attachment to and an appreciation for the art form then. But the passion really came about when he was living in a retirement home and had a neighbor who loved operetta and had this apparently world-class extensive collection of operetta DVDs. And he and this friend started meeting weekly to watch them together. They would meet every Wednesday evening. They had a standing date to get together and watch operetta. And through the course of their time together, he developed a very serious passion for it. It became, so as I mentioned in the introduction, in case there are people listening who didn't hear it, he told me on the phone one day he missed his calling and he should have been building sets for operettas in Vienna. That's what his true calling, that's what he feels like. Now, I'm sure he was being a little bit, facetious, but I think it is the overwhelming passion of his life currently. That is what brings him the most joy. That's what he loves to think about and talk about and analyze. And that's why he wanted to make it his so-called final lecture. I also share the hope that it's not actually his final lecture.
I have a question actually to both you and Mark, because you are people who are related to art, and art has this performance element. So what I found mostly interesting and inspiring for the context of my life was someone with charisma like Peikoff. He can talk in a way about anything and you will listen. So I stayed, and it was late, relatively late in the UK. I have no idea about operetta. No offense, I have zero interest in operetta, but I was stuck there. I was listening, and it's not only because it's the last lecture, so I have to pay homage. No, it was genuinely interesting seeing someone be so passionate about something. So the question is this: is this the charisma of the good communicator who can even talk to you about, I don't know, from windsurfing to the weather, and you might have zero interest, but you're going to listen because it's a good communicator? Or is it the charisma of the person who is so invested in something, is so into something, is so passionate about something that suddenly you're also invested in it? Like, oh, I didn't know this thing exists, but now I want to know more. Tell me more. So what's the takeaway from you for this stuff, that some people can talk about anything and you will listen?
Mark, did you want to say something about that?
Well, I would think it's the latter. For me, as an actor, the more engaged you are in the problem, the more passionately invested you are in what you're doing. It's that connection with what you're doing and that level of engagement that usually drags the audience along with you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's sort of what it is. What do you think, Lisa?
So when Leonard proposed this lecture, I think his motivation was he really does believe this is an art form more people need to enjoy. He feels like it's an art that's been lost to modern Americans, and that people would really profoundly benefit from making this art part of their lives. So I think there's a very genuine conviction and desire to communicate the value of operetta to a new audience. Now, I don't think was under any illusions that everybody in the audience would immediately be converted to the value of operetta. And there are a lot of hurdles to coming to that art form in particular. I think just the production values, for example, we saw some beautiful clips from his personal favorite operetta, The Circus Princess. And the production values have that B movie quality that we've all learned to ridicule and feel alienated from. And you have to overcome that to be able to really engage with this art form. But knowing that not everybody would be convinced by the lecture, I still felt certain it would be valuable to everybody, not just because we're all seeing Leonard Peikoff, and everybody, of course, was delighted to and relished just the opportunity for that, but also at a meta level, seeing somebody be passionate about something and learning what it means for them to be passionate about that is going to be translatable into anything that the rest of us do. So you could either come away from that and think, I now really want to pursue operetta and make that a part of my life, or you could at least come away from it and say, I want to love things that much. And he's giving us sort of a map for what it looks like to love something that much.
Can you do me a favor, since I didn't see the lecture, and for anybody else watching who didn't see the lecture, can you tell us a little bit about what operetta is and what makes it such a unique and engaging form?
So I'll try to pull out some of the highlights of it. So first, one of the things that he stressed is that, so he likes what's called the silver age of operetta. There's a golden age and a silver age, and the silver age was his preferred time. And he said, what defines operetta in the silver age is, the phrase he used was intoxicating glamour. So it's a world of intoxicating glamour. And it was created at a time in history when there was just a culture of optimism and innovation and optimism, and that this intoxicating glamour went along with that. It was a really benevolent time. So a few of the things, it's tough to summarize because there were so many points, but I'll try to hit on a few of the highlights. Part of it is the benevolence and the glamour. He differentiated a lot from opera and from Broadway musicals. Broadway musicals, he said, tend to be optimistic. I think he's thinking, he cited Guys and Dolls. He's thinking of that era of musicals. And he said they tend to be optimistic and benevolent and joyful, but also sort of superficial and light, and not to have real sincere depth of values. So he thinks of those sorts of musicals as entertainment as opposed to real art. Opera tends to be devastatingly awful. I mean, it tends to be grim and gloomy and tragic and terrible, but there's more sophistication of story and seriousness of values at stake in an opera. So operetta has the benevolence of a musical and the seriousness of opera put together into an art form. So that was one aspect of it. But one thing he stressed in terms of the person, so he called this his virtual reality. That's what he decided, that's the analogy he decided to draw. He said he told a story about a woman in labor who had to have a very uncomfortable medical procedure and didn't have time to get pain relief in the form of an epidural. So they gave her a virtual reality device instead and put her in a world with penguins playing in the snow while she underwent this painful medical procedure. And apparently she was so completely distracted by the immersive experience of this virtual reality penguins playing in the snow that she felt no pain and had no awareness that the procedure ever happened. And he said for him, that's what experiencing an operetta feels like, that it's so utterly immersive and so joyful that it separates him entirely from any pain or anything negative about the world. Any pain personally, I mean, he even described having a headache, but then when he starts watching an operetta, the headache goes away because he's so immersed. But he described some things about operetta that make that immersion uniquely possible. And there's everybody who didn't get to see the lecture will have an opportunity to. It's been taken down temporarily, but the Institute assures me it'll be back up. So you'll get this much more clearly from him. But another unique thing about operetta is that it combines dialogue with operatic singing, with so dialogue with music with operatic singing. And he talks a lot about how the combination of all those things, the dialogue gives it a reality that opera might not have. Opera is more abstract because you have to get everything from the arias. The dialogue makes it more relatable and the characters more real, but the operatic singing allows for these shadings and nuances of emotion that a Broadway musical singing can't, or just, dialogue in a movie can't. So the unique combination of music and dialogue and story, he experiences it as utterly immersive. Now, the interesting thing for me is not having reached that point. It's almost the opposite from initially trying to get into that art, because of the production values being distancing, and because even the music is sort of unfamiliar to a lot of us, the style of the music. So I have a lot of hurdles to get over to feel that level of immersion, but that's what he experiences from it.
You mentioned music, and earlier we mentioned the good teacher. So yesterday I was talking with someone who was in the lecture, and he told me that although he's been playing drums for ages, when Peikoff told about this, the rhythm, I think 4/3, I don't even know how, but that person said it clicked. It's like, oh yeah, it's and that's why this is rock and this is something else. So even in something which is not his terrain, this talent and this basically calling of being a teacher still shows off. So I have some question about Dr. Peikoff, the person, and some beautiful things that I've noticed, but let's go to some super chats and then we will finish with that. So, okay, where to be? Bonnie, thank you so much for your super chats. So, question for Lisa. Has Dr. Peikoff said if Ayn Rand saw any Viennese operettas in person? What were her favorite operetta recordings? Thank you so much for arranging his lecture. P.S. His friend Art must be a great guy.
Yes. So I'm afraid I can't answer that. I can give I'm not sure how to share this, but I have a list of he gave a handout at the lecture, which I think is included in the broadcast. So when that recording is available, it should be part of the
It was part of the Zoom party,
part of the
so
Zoom,
it should be also available.
So it was a list of his 8 favorite operettas. I do know that the composers are Kalman, Strauss II, and who was the third? Oh gosh, no, I'm blanking out on the third. But anyway, that list should be readily available.
And
But
also the recording.
Circus Princess is his very favorite, his personal favorite by Emmerich Kalman.
Can you repeat that? Because I think I interrupted you.
Oh yeah, Circus Princess by Emmerich Kalman is his favorite by far.
Okay.
And that's the one he showed clips from.
So thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Kiana. Thank you, Phil. So Phil asks, does Dr. Peikoff have any favorite operettas that anyone knows? Lisa already mentioned this. And thanks also to Phil. Thanks to Robert. Robert says, no question or comment, just smiles. Merci. Thank you very much, Robert. Pooja, thanks. So lovely hearing the highlights from Lisa. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Mark says, thanks for such a great variety, volume, and quality of objectivist content. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to finish with a question, not a question, your reflection on the personality of Dr. Peikoff. So for those of us who don't know him, he's the strict teacher with a sense of humor, but we have him in his mind as this, I would say, intimidating person, maybe also because of the respect. I've heard people I've heard Yaron Brook many times saying, if you ever have performed, like if you are worried for public speaking, imagine these sessions we had where we had to perform in front of Dr. Peikoff and then he would have to give us feedback. So we have this view, or the person who writes facts and values and he says, this is it. And lately, I'm sure for people who know him, it's not lately, but at least for us. So we've seen him in the event of the Ayn Rand Center UK in his birthday, where he was so moved by it. And I think you also mentioned it, that the surprise he gets by how many people he have touched with his work. Yeah. And he had an adventure. He had the problem with his health recently, and he got a lot of value from people sending him cards, even people he didn't know. So what do you want to tell us a bit about Dr. Peikoff, the person, and how you have experienced him? And this, let's say, on the one hand, is very strict and intimidating teacher. On the other side, this very humane person who is almost surprised that he has had such an effect on so many people, and so many of us love him so much.
It's a great question. Everything you just said about him is 100% true, from the incredibly intimidating and formidable personality to the warmth and kindness and generosity. So one story that comes to mind immediately, which actually came up in the course of the lecture, someone asked if he listened to Operetta or watched Operetta while he was in the hospital recovering from COVID. And he said, oh no, they didn't, there was no opportunity. They had one movie that I could watch, and it was about a dog. And he was making a joke, but I think he also mentioned in the lecture, the movie was called A Dog's Purpose. I think that's the name of the movie. And I haven't seen it, but my impression is it's this very, very sappy, sentimental movie about a relationship with a dog. And he told me he watched it back to back to back and cried every time. I mean, this movie meant a lot to him. And I think he mentioned getting the book afterwards and reading the book. So he has a dog, Kiki, who is getting up there in years, and he is so deeply, sentimentally, profoundly attached to this dog. I need her to live forever because I think it'll help him live forever. So he does have this very tender, sentimental side. There's no question about it. Also, I'm pretty sure you've heard this story before, but on the intimidating side, when I took classes with him, which I still am in awe at the honor of having been able to take classes with him as a student in the Objectivist Graduate Center. But he famously, at the end of my teaching presentation to him, called it nerve-wracking, grotesque, and a rocket ship through hell, simply because of the pace of my lecture. Those were the nerve-wracking, grotesque, a rocket ship through hell. And I remember him saying about my friend Chip Joyce gave a presentation at the conclusion of which he said he delivered with the precision of a surgeon, only he cut off the wrong leg. So he always delivers it with very sharp humor, but very unsparingly too.
Well, survive that, you could survive anything.
That's right. Yeah. Well, recall that Whiplash is one of his favorite movies. So
I was about to say that. When you said that he watched the dog film 5 times, I remember him saying in the podcast that he watched Whiplash something 6 or something like that at the cinema, not on DVD, at the cinema. And I remember him saying, the reason I watched it 6 times is because I wanted to make sure that it's as good as I thought it was.
So that's perfect. I mean, that almost gives me chills, because look at his capacity to love things. I want to be someone, I try to be somebody who loves things that much.
So very good question by Marilyn, particularly for those of us who are into teaching as a profession. So it says, I think Dr. Peikoff is a brilliant lecturer, and he also worked extremely hard to develop his lecturing skills. Lisa, do you know anything about that, Lisa? How he became that teacher and that, I would say, performer in a good way that he is?
Well, I mean, there are many different aspects to it, but I'm sure if you asked him the question, he would say working with Ayn Rand is the way he developed his ability to lecture as he does now, just in terms of the development of his intellectual capacity and the rigor and depth of their deep, long conversations with each other. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. But I also know, I will never forget Harry Binswanger saying, he was describing Leonard's work schedule, and it was something like he worked for 6 hours a day, and the sense was that that's not a long period of time, but Harry's comment at the time was, yeah, but when Leonard sits down to work, the earth moves. So there's an intensity about him when he thinks about things. And even, okay, so the amount of time and the drafts that he created just for this operetta lecture are incredible. And even when he wanted to write a brief review of my Keats lecture, I got an email from him saying, sorry, it's taking so long, but I'm on the 8th draft of this 3-paragraph review of the Keats lecture. He's not somebody who, just kind of wings it or just throw something down. He goes back and meticulously goes over and over things. Even I ran my introduction for this lecture by him because I included some personal information. I wanted to make sure it was okay with him. And I got a mini writing course from some offhand comments he made about my introduction. I came away feeling like I was a better writer because he spent 5 minutes telling me what objections he had to the way it was written. So
I think that's one of the reasons he couldn't continue to do his syndicated radio show, because it took so much effort to produce I think it started as a 1-hour show, but then I think it stretched to 2 or 3 hours if I remember. And it took so much effort to come up with a deep show every single day. It was just impossible to maintain that work. And I remember listening to him and thinking it was the best show on radio, and being quite saddened by the fact that it was just too much for him to sustain it for more years.
Yeah, he's not going to be content to be off the cuff. He's going to put real work into it.
At the time that he was doing it, sorry to break off, but what's his name? Vincent Bugliosi was doing his book tour for the book that he wrote on the Simpson trial. And I'd listened to Vincent on 3 or 4 other shows do the same spiel. And when he came on Leonard's show, Leonard asked him a series of deep questions that nobody had asked him, and actually stumped Vincent for the first time. And he wasn't intended to. He was just dealing with the book and an analysis of the book on a level that nobody else was.
Oh.
So anyway, that's an aside.
And you mentioned the radio, so my favorite Peikoff moment ever was the Christmas episode on the radio. So in a way, because I listened to it as a podcast at some random point, July or something like that, I felt I was walking in winter wonderland. It's go find it. I think you can find it even on YouTube. If you put Leonard Peikoff Christmas or podcast, you're gonna find it, one of his most brilliant radio episodes. And you mentioned he learned from Ayn Rand, but I think he became a much better public speaker than Ayn Rand. And as Yaron Brook had said, he has this unique ability where he's reading, but you don't get that he's reading. It's as if he's speaking, and it's completely organic, although everything is prepared. And Lisa.
I think, the level of dedication he puts into making sure every word is perfect, but then when he's delivering it, it still comes straight from his heart and soul. So you can tell that when he's reading it, but he's also done the work to make sure that his formulations are exactly what he wants them to be.
By the way,
thank you very much also, Roland, for the super chat. I have one last question. Since Dr. Peikoff mentioned himself, was there any symbolism with that shirt? For people who haven't seen it, it was
he loves that shirt. So he has another of his passions. So, he takes his passion seriously. One of his passions is the way he described it to me prior to that particular shirt was that it has to be, a nice, well-tailored, I think he likes silk shirts. It has to have loud patterns without definable objects on him. That's what he told me, because I've gone looking for shirts for him, and it was very important that they not be flowers or palm trees, or it had to be abstract. But this is his new favorite shirt, and it's Christmas.
It's Christmas. Yes,
it's a bunch of Christmas, like gingerbread men and Santa Clauses and stuff. So it's this very nice high quality silk shirt with a very loud Christmas pattern on it. So I don't know if you heard this, but after the lecture, I decided I needed to buy him a gift to commemorate this occasion. And it came to me as a moment of inspiration. I sat down at Google and typed out men's silk shirt, penguins, snow. Because of the analogy, he described Operetta with that virtual reality analogy as his penguins in the snow. So I found this amazing vintage silk shirt with penguins sipping cocktails on the beach in the snow. So I haven't had a chance to present it to him yet, but that's going to be my gift for him.
Okay, so we verified that it was a Christmas shirt, because I wasn't sure. It was a Christmas shirt. Okay. So let me see if we have any other last minute questions. Regina, thank you so much. So many people with super chats. I hope I haven't missed anything. If I have, my apologies. So we're gonna move it to Clubhouse for no more than 20 minutes, because we have something coming at 7. Let me say something about Lisa and about this app that you have that I already mentioned, the Read With Me. So I read Dostoevsky's White Nights through this app. So this app is free. And what happens is Lisa reads the book, but also does commentary on the book. And you can even find books that have, let's say, courses, because it's like a course, like that have, and you can listen to them in retrospect, but also you run courses, let's say, in real time. And I think these days you are doing the Browning version by Terence Rattigan. Am I right?
No, you're out of date.
I'm
doing that one's complete. That one's in the app, bingeable now. I'm doing the Picture of Dorian Gray currently.
Oh, Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, so where I'm going with all this, you should check it out, people. It's really good. It's, in a way, it has the advantages of Audible with the advantages that you get Lisa's mind and you get Lisa's insight. And if there is one person that can inspire you into liking art, Lisa is definitely among these people. So check it out. Mark, any parting words?
I'm getting the app right away. I'm going to start. Can't wait.
Good. So again, the app is Read With Me. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, and you can find in the usual places, in the Apple Store, and I mean, that's where I have it, because I have.
The website for it is readwithmesalon.com.
Right. Yeah. And there you can also find the past courses. Readwithmesalon.com, and there you can find past courses. Thank you very much, Christopher, for this last minute super chat. So we go to Clubhouse in 1 hour and 22 minutes, people. We have Harry Binswanger for HBTV 11. Today he's doing more of a free-flowing Q&A, but also he's gonna discuss the issue, is objectivism difficult to get? And as you can imagine, when Harry asks a question, the answer is not obvious. So the answer is no. Although if you read the book How We Know, it's complicated, but you're gonna find out. So Lisa, thanks so much. This went really well. I really enjoyed it. And thanks for organizing this. We got so much value out of Saturday's events. And of course, we also got value out of today's event. So thank you so much. So everyone, we're going to be in Clubhouse for, again, 15 minutes or so, and see you all there. Thank you very much. And thanks to your super chatters. Bye-bye.
Thank you.